Tips and tricks of the day. All right, how many times have you had to play yarn chicken? I've had to do that a few times, and especially when I'm making a shawl. And so there has to be a better way, right? And so through my research this week, I found a couple of really interesting things and ways that you can, one, avoid yarn chicken, and two, cope with it if it happens. If you run out of yarn and you still don't have the size of thing that you want. All right. Did you know, here's was one of my ahas, because I never had heard this before, that you need to do the bind off. You basically need the same amount of yarn that you need to knit 2 rows. I knew you needed a little bit more, but I didn't realize it would be like that much more. And, you know, because you do want to have a springy bind off, and so you use more yarn in that bind off because you're trying to make it, you know, not really tight, right? So if you're getting towards the end of your ball, end of your yarn, your thread, how do you know if you're going to make it or not? So here's the way that you do it. And I'm sorry, you do have to do a little bit of math, and you do have to have a scale. So the scale that I use, it's just a digital scale that weighs in ounces and grams. You want to have something that weighs in grams because, you know, a yarn ball is somewhere between, you know, 1 and 4 ounces. And if your scale only weighs 2 ounces, then it's not going to be, it's not going to give you the amount of the information you need. And I'm not coming up with the right word, but it's not going to tell you close enough to the ounce or close enough to the gram what you're going to need. I think I got this at Target a long time ago. It's lasted for a long time. So basically what you do is you realize, oh my God, I think I might run out of yarn. So you take your cake or your ball, whatever you're using, and you weigh it, and you write it down. Okay. Knit 2 more rows of whatever it is that you're that you're knitting, whether that's a sweater, a scarf, a shawl. Weigh it again. All right. So that difference between the first weighing and the second weighing is how much you need to have in reserve for your bind off, just for your bind off. All right, so that's great if you have enough yarn, okay? So if you have enough, that's great. If you like just enough or like a few grams extra, but not enough to do a whole nother row, right? So just go and start your bind off. Let's say you have more. Maybe not this much more, right? But a smaller amount. How do I know how many more rows I can get? So here's where the more math comes in. So you're going to take whatever your ball weighs right now. You already did those 2 rows. Your ball weighs, I'm going to be easy and say 50 grams, right? You're going to subtract out what you need for that bind off. Let's say you needed 2 grams. Now you have 48 grams, okay? Then you're going to divide that by the number of ounces that it took you to do 1 row. Because you just did that math with doing 2 rows, and you can divide that in half, da-da-da-da-da. And anyway, so you take the ball minus the bind off number, divide that by how many grams it's going to take you to do 1 row, And that will tell you about how many more rows you can do before you have to bind off. Hopefully that will make sense. On the YouTube channel, and I will also be putting this in a blog, I'll write it out with the math in there. So if you didn't get it right, come back next week, look at the blog, number one, or look at the YouTube, and it will have the math there for you. All right? Now, okay, you did all that, and oh my gosh, I only have enough to do one row. Now what do I do? So you have a couple of different choices. You can frog it back, take it back a row, so then you have two rows that you can bind off. But let's say it's not big enough, or you still want to go, or maybe there's a special stitch that you need to complete, or heaven forbid it's a shawl that has a lace bind off or something like that, and you're not all the way through, or you won't have enough to get all the way through. You can also add a different yarn, all right? But make it look intentional. That's the whole thing. You don't want people say, oh my gosh, well, you can tell that she ran out of yarn, right? So the way you make it look intentional is if you're going to add a stripe of something, it's one of two ways. One, you make it 3 to 4 inches, so it looks like you intended to do it. If you're doing like a lace bind off or something, make that whole thing the new yarn. Or the other thing, which I really kind of like, and it kind of reminds me a little bit of Stephen West or something, is that with the new yarn, pick something that looks intentional, okay? That maybe is a contrasting color, and just do the bind off with it so that it looks like piping. It looks like piping that you might put on the edge of a quilt, or, the edge of something. And I really kind of like that idea. And you could even do like, you could do an I-cord bind off so that it's a little bit thicker, and then it really does look intentional. Does that make sense? So we don't have to be chicken about running out of yarn anymore, as long as you have a scale and you can do a little bit of math, and you can think about what your plan B is in the event that you might not have enough yarn for exactly what you want to make.